Okay, let's get started. Welcome everyone to our webinar today, The Power of DevOps and Automated Testing. We'll be doing some exciting announcements today, introducing a new integration between Blue Canvas and Provar testing. I'm Jack Moxon. I'm with Blue Canvas, and on the line with me is John Robinson. John, can you say hello?
Hello.
All right, so we'll be kind of walking you through kind of the new integration, how it works, and answer any questions at the end. There is a QA panel, so we've feel free to drop any questions throughout in that panel, and we'll be able to read those out during the question and answer section of the recording of the webinar. We'll also be recording the webinar, so everyone will get a link to watch the video recording afterwards if you want to forward it to anyone else on your team going forward. So without further ado, let me just do some introductions. So as I mentioned, my name is Jack. I'm one of the founders of Blue Canvas. Have been in developer tooling for most of my career. And I thought I'd throw on my favorite Git meme here, which is from XKCD. He talks about how this is Git. It tracks collaborative work on projects through a beautiful distributed graph theory tree model. And then his colleagues say, cool, how do we use it? And he says, no idea, just memorize these shell commands and type them to sync up. If you get errors, save your work elsewhere, delete the project and download a fresh copy. And I know, from my own background as a developer, and using Git can sometimes feel very, very painful. So that's why we built Blue Canvas. It's a source control and CI platform built for Salesforce developers, and to kind of take away some of the hassle of using the command line while giving you the full flexibility of a real DevOps tool. And with me is John Robinson. John?
So, hi, again, my name is John Robinson, and I'm the head of North America for Provar, and kind of have a wide and varied career in terms of organizations and roles within those organizations, primarily in the QA space and automation space, and have been doing this for a long time. I genuinely geek out over the automation side of things, and from a meme perspective, this the meme that we're showing here is kind of the epitome of what it's like for me to find something, start to automate it, and then the time spent to keep that automation working and running is quickly overtakes the time it would have taken to just do it manually. And that's actually really good example of why Provar is so exciting to me, because it takes a lot of that stuff and takes some of that maintenance and long running work out of the equation, and makes it really, really quick and easy to get up and going fast in a useful way. So yeah, that's me.
Thanks, John. So today we're going to walk through a couple quick slides on kind of Blue Canvas platform for the Provar folks that are coming in and are new. We're going to walk through the Provar platform very quickly in a couple slides, and then we'll demonstrate the integration of how you can kick off Provar tests from Blue Canvas. So just a little bit of background. So this is a sad tweet that one of the Salesforce PMs we work with sent to me. It was from an admin who accidentally refreshed a sandbox and lost 7 months of development work, which is hopefully for most of us a pretty extreme case, but certainly not very fun. And we hear every single day from teams who have lost a couple weeks of work, maybe a day of work. It definitely starts to add up. And so this is part of the reason why it's great to have DevOps in place. But for many Salesforce teams, it's been a challenge, right? Getting admins and devs using source control is hard for a number of reasons. Number one, that Git meme I showed earlier, like source control and command line and Git can be very confusing for just about anybody. But let alone if you're trying to use it with giant XML files, it can kind of be a little bit difficult, or declarative metadata. Of course, doing deployments are very manual, so they're error prone and they take forever. We talk to teams every single day who are using spreadsheets and change sets and struggling with things, and they're trying to speed up so they can actually meet their deadlines and their sprint goals. And so DevOps can help with that. Businesses are always looking for more visibility into when are changes coming and why were they made, to have that historical record. So those are some of the challenges that some of our customers are facing. And then often there's just, John mentioned maintenance headcount. needed just to maintain a DevOps process, and it can be very frustrating. So the Blue Canvas philosophy is very simple. We kind of have taken the the Facebook message of move fast and break things and change it to move fast and don't break things. For most of our customers, their enterprises, they really can't afford to have that kind of cavalier attitude towards changes. They need to have a safe environment because business runs on Salesforce. Downtime is very expensive. So to increase quality, we offer the ability to roll back to previous states and do safer deployments in the first place. We let you move faster by doing these super fast Git-based deployments, which I'll show briefly, and then just enabling your business to kind of meet the challenges and get ahead of the curve and ahead of the competition to drive more revenue. So how do we do it? A number of ways. So we increase quality through code reviews and collaboration. You'll see we have a nice ticketing system with comments that allows developers to kind of get a second set of eyes on different things. We do instant backup of all changes in real time, which gives you the ability to roll back in a very granular way as needed. We automate so many steps, so that increases the speed and velocity of your release cycle. We have a lot of teams that are reporting 90% increases. That means they're basically going from 2 hours to compile a change set down to a couple of minutes to not only compile everything, but also deploy. And then we take away the headache of maintenance. So no more running a Jenkins environment. We actually handle all of that for you very simply in the cloud. So we'll show that in a second. But John will speak now a little bit to some of the philosophies behind what Provar is trying to accomplish.
Yeah, so one of the key challenges is in testing in general is trying to make sure you have something that's consistent and repeatable. And when you're doing that from a manual perspective, that gets really, really monotonous. Let's try this. Okay, that works. Okay, let's do the next one. Yeah, that works too. Yeah, and it just ad infinitum. It keeps going and going and going. And so some of the ways that we try and solve that. If you'll move to the next slide, we've got a lot of really painful problems when it comes to manual. We've got, like I said, it's time consuming, it's monotonous. Code-based automation is just really, really difficult to scale. It sounds great on paper, but it introduces a whole nother level of maintenance costs that you don't ever factor. And then, especially when it comes to Salesforce solution, general testing tools just quite frankly can't move fast enough, and they're not incentivized to move fast enough. And that's what we need a way around. Having a way to do declarative solutions, we need to be able to test that too. And that's not always something that's easy to do with some of the general solutions that are on the market and out there. And that's kind of where we look at it as it's not just a bunch of people doing testing, right? QA has grown in scope a lot larger than that. And this tweet kind of sums it up the best, is that, it really is an art. The ability to come up with all of these different scenarios and all of these different approaches is so difficult to do in the best of circumstances. And when you get into a rut and the monotony of doing that, it gets really hard. And the reply here is easily one of my favorites, because this is totally the type of person that I'm looking for on my teams in general. Is, I want people to be able to look at it not from the standpoint of solving the problem or testing all the possible permutations. I'd rather you get creative and actually try and break something. And that's what Provar really kind of enables you to do, is start to look at that side of the equation, where you're now looking at breaking things rather than having to do all the monotonous stuff. Provar's got that covered. This frees you up to do the other fun stuff. Lets you build test cases that mimic your manual test process. Exactly what you do on the manual side, you can mimic that, not just mimic in a one-to-one relationship, but mimic it in a fashion that is actually better, faster, and more efficient. They're, from a Salesforce standpoint, maintainable, self-healing, very, very robust support for all of the functionality and features that Salesforce provides out of the box. The reality is, when you make a change, In traditional development, you make a change to a screen, for example, it gets very difficult to maintain automation tests to account for that. Provar can say, oh, hey, I see that you guys made a change over here. Yeah, we'll take care of that. And you don't even notice that we take care of it behind the scene. And along those lines, we're very tightly aligned with the Salesforce roadmap. So, when they're starting their development and pushing out to just the development sandboxes, before it even gets out to general availability sandboxes, we're already starting development work on that. We're very tightly coupled so that when you're ready to do your development and your testing internally, we're already ready to go. We've got it covered. We're working on summer 19 now. We've already got winter 19 on the roadmap. We're prepping for all of the stuff now so that you guys don't have to worry about it. And that's kind of what the big advantage that Provar brings to the table is. So from a testing perspective, how does this help? What we're going to kind of do is introduce a way to let you use Blue Canvas to kind of automate the process of managing your source control and DevOps process. It lets you use Provar to run your automated tests as part of this process, and then how to make this an integrated thing that truly lets you get your Salesforce releases out faster and cheaper. And one of the biggest and most exciting aspects of this is we have a kind of, this is our public debut of a containerized version of Provar working on a Docker instance with Blue Canvas as part of the overall lifecycle. So Jack, I'll let you take it from here and roll with it.
Great, thanks, John. Yep, we're super excited to kind of demo this. So let me switch over to my next stream here. So can you guys see my screen, John, just so I can make sure that
Yep,
right?
You're good.
Okay, cool. So I'm gonna do a really quick overview of kind of how Blue Canvas gets everything into source control and into a DevOps pipeline very quickly in a nice way for developers as well as admins. And then we'll show it kind of integrating with Provar. So the first thing to note is that Blue Canvas is a Git repository under the hood. So everything that we do is Git based, and we allow you to connect each of your environments up as branches on that Git repository. So for example, we have a production environment over here. We have a couple of staging QA type environments. We have a few different developer testing environments, and you can see each of them is linked to an org. And if I want to connect a new branch or a new org, it's very simple. I can just say new branch, say branch 2. I can tell if it's a sandbox, prod, or dev edition. We then go through the Salesforce OAuth flow here. So you could just connect as an admin user into that org. Not going to do that here since I've already got it set up. But if you did that, then we'd actually start a connection, and we'll be listening for any changes that happen in real time and committing them into that branch. So as an example, let's log into this Provar Dev 1 box here. So you should be able to see now that I'm over here in Provar Dev 1, and we can go to the developer console for that. And I've got a class open here, so I'm just going to say hello everyone, announcing Provar integration, whatever, click save. So just a simple comment, but what's interesting here is you'll note that it's saving a little bit slowly. I guess Salesforce might be moving slowly this morning. So once this saves, Blue Canvas is going to run, pick it up, and commit that change into the branch. You'll note that I don't have to go to the command line, git add, git commit, git push, all that stuff. I can basically ignore that. As soon as it saves, Blue Canvas can pick it up, and we're polling for that every minute. So that just saves. So it'll take about a minute for that to show up in the system. And that's great. I'm using the developer console, but we can do that with pretty much any IDE that might be on the market. But of course, we also have declarative changes, and this is where Blue Canvas can really make a big difference. So I can return into that sandbox. I'm in the object manager here. You can go to a custom object, which we've called a book, which is basically a book in the store. You can see that there are many different fields and stuff. I can go to this custom field called an ISBN number, and I didn't know until recently what the ISBN number was, but I think it stands for national standard book number. And we can add that as a description and help text so people actually know what the ISBN field is. We click save. And again, that's all we have to do. So you can very easily imagine your admins, your business analysts, for example, going in, changing fields, changing objects, process builder, workflows, all the different things are supported here. And those will show up in Blue Canvas. So if I return into the Blue Canvas environment, we can click into that branch, and we can click into SRC here, and we can see all the different metadata types that we're tracking on that particular sandbox. I can click into any of them, and I can actually see more information about any of them here. Now, it's worth noting that we actually use Salesforce DX metadata directory structure under the hood. So instead of each of these fields showing up as part of one giant XML file, we actually break them out into multiple XML files. So our custom field ISBN here is its own field, and we can actually see there was a change to it recently. So you can see that it now has our description and help text, which we added, which is kind of nice to see. But more interestingly, you can kind of see the history of that field over time. So you can see when it was originally created, you can see when it was changed, and you'll note that we actually pick up the username of the person who made the change, and we give it a timestamp, and you can see a nice clean Git diff here. So as you're making changes over time, you can start to see those things particularly clearly. So that's great. So now everything is backed up in real time, and that's kind of the basis for kind of deployments, rollbacks, and things like that. So if I want to move my changes from Provar Dev into, say, Provar QA, for example, which is our QA environment, I can actually go here and say Provar Dev 1 into Provar QA. I click on compare. Now, because we're Git based, we can actually do a very, very quick comparison. You can see all the differences between them. You can see in this case, my demo class is there. So it picked up our change as we expected. It also picked up, there's a new layout because I added the field and some of the different changes here. Because it's Git based, it's fairly instant to do that. But now even more exciting than just comparing the different orgs, we can actually create a deployment request. So this is something like a pull request combined with a change set. So what it would be is that updating field and class, my changes go here. Now this is kind of like a ticketing system, right? So developers use this to kind of reference, okay, why did they make changes, and to do code reviews. So giving it a good title is useful. Giving it a powerful description makes sense. We even have tagging, so we can say 19Q1 and add it to this release. We have a source snapshot, which I'll come back to later for rollbacks, but if you want to roll back to a previous state, you can go ahead and do that here. And then of course, we automatically generate all of the files that have been selected. So that have been detected as differences. So I can say, okay, I want to just add that field, or I can say, I just want to add, that class that we changed, or we can add everything. So we have the opportunity to do that, and we can create the deployment request. And ultimately, what this deployment request ends up being is both a unit of work with a nice clean diff where we can see all the differences. It's also going to run a Salesforce validation to make sure that it is indeed valid Salesforce code. And it's also going to allow us to do code review, so all the commenting here. So we'll come back to that in a second, but that's kind of an overview of Blue Canvas. There's a lot more to it. We'd be happy to show everyone in demos later if they want to get in touch with us. But that kind of gives you the overview. So a very, very tight integration with Git, very simple and intuitive for admins to use. But you'll notice there's this new feature here, so post-deployment builds. This is really exciting. This is kind of the beginning of Blue Canvas CI. And you can see we have the Provar logo here. So what I'd like to now do is show a Provar test failing. So if I go into my deployment list, you can see a previously deployed test. It looks like this was number 18. It deployed. We can see that it packaged, it validated, and was deployed successfully. We can see it was done by Richard Clark over at Provar. We can see the files are included and what the changes were in that test. And you can see that. But you'll notice that this actually deployed cleanly, but I can see that it actually has a failed Provar test. So if I go into the report HTML, I can of course look through the build log, but Provar provides these very nice reports where I can kind of see, okay, there was 3 tests that ran. There was an API test, a second API test that both passed, but there was a failed test here. And if I click into that, I can actually get a nice clean log what happened. There's even screenshots that you can check out as you go down. And I'll see at the very bottom that something failed, right? So it looks like what happened was it was looking for a description field, but couldn't find it. And this was actually a real bug, I believe, in a previous webinar. And it could easily happen, right? And you could easily not be caught by a validation step, not be caught by a unit test. Only these kind of functional tests can catch this kind of change. And maybe it's a simple example, because what it looks like is there's actually a typo here that was missed, right? You can see it says description. So that's what broke it. And because of Provar, we were able to catch that. So what I want to do now is roll this back, and then we'll go and try to fix it from there. So the way to do a quick rollback here is I can just select the same org, so the source and destination, which is Provar QA. And you can see there's no changes because it's the same org. I can say rollback and write a description, and I can go to my source snapshot. So I can basically bring it back to a previous example, and I can see that it's going to remove the modification that we did. I can tag it as a rollback. We're going to create the deployment request, and this is going to roll it back in UAT, which is great. Now, in the meantime, I'm going to pass it over to John. So while this is running, he can show us kind of how that test was created in the first place and how Provar makes it really simple to create these automated scripts.
Cool, thanks, Jack. So what I'm going to do is jump over, and I've got our basic kind of test builder application open and ready to go. I'm sitting at our sandbox home screen, and what I'm going to kind of walk through is how to record a basic test, how to then go and look and move and navigate within the system within Test Builder, never even having to go to the desktop version, but literally building and working with a live test on the fly. So for this case, we're going to create a new lead, and I'm going to go directly to the leads tab, right click, and do add the test case. Now you'll notice I didn't have to tell it I was coming to the leads page. It automatically picked that up because, again, we have got all the metadata information about your organization. And so now we can pull that down, and when we go to the page, we're not actually looking at it at that point in time for the element to interact with. We already know what it is. You're just telling us as part of it, hey, this is the element I want to work with. And we say, oh, great, look, we know all about that. What do you want to do with it? So we've got, you can do your standard click. We can also read assert to make sure that the right label's there. If there's an attached file, we could download that. In this case, I just want to do click. So when I hit add and do, what that's going to do is actually step back in to the screen and click that button for me. And then I'm going to get this handy dandy little green checkbox that indicates Provar was successfully able to do that action. And now you're ready for the next thing. So when you get that green checkbox, you know that it is now up and working and we're good to go. You don't have to worry about going back and forth. All right, did this action work or this action? We are already taking care of that for you. Like I said, this is what you're running in. We call it Test Builder. But if you notice, the second line is Test Runner. You're literally editing and working with a live test case on the fly, which is pretty slick. So for this, what we'll do, similar to what we did to add a new, click the new button, we'll just put in some information. And if we right click on it and say, add a test case, we're gonna get, okay, great. Still Salesforce layout, but now we're on the lead new screen. So, okay, got a first name here. We've got other fields we could interact with. We already know about those, but we're working with this particular one. I'm gonna put a value in here. Now, in the case of the stepping back into it, doing the action to making sure it's right, in order to show this, because I've already got a value in there, I could change this and just put a different name in there. And when I hit add and do, it's going to go switch to the new screen from a step perspective and then go and change my name for me. So I could also come in here and do this just as easily with a right click, add the test case, and it's going to tell me, oh, hey, you need a value here. So we'll go ahead and put a value in, and we're all set to go now. I can add and do that one. It's going to fill it in for me. And I've got one more field here that we require. and it's going to pick all this up, same as before, hit add and do, and now we're ready to go. So we'll right click, add test case. And in this case, you know, we can capture on error, or in the case of, hey, we want to check things between different environments, I want to be able to see, tell me what this screen looks like before, and then also take a screenshot after. So when it does this, it's going to say, okay, cool, let me look at this thing before I made that click, and then I'm going to look at it again afterwards and make sure that what I expected to have happen actually did happen. So even if you don't have an error, you can still capture a screenshot in specific places for specific reasons, which is pretty handy. So we'll get that created. Now we have a lead created, we're ready to go, but we actually want to do some more stuff on here. So what we want to do is maybe transition this to the next state. So I can right click, do add the test case, and now it's going to recognize that I'm on the lead path assistant screen, and I'm wanting to change in the lead path assistant steps to the contact. So I recognize that, great, that's what I want to do. Hit add and do, and it's going to step into the new screen now and do that action for me.
This is slick, John. I like it.
And then, thank you, sir. As part of that, you know, typically you have to acknowledge that this is what you want to do. So let's right click and do add the test case. And it's going to say, okay, great. What we're now going to do is just mark it as our current status. Hit add and do. That's going to lock that change in, which is exactly what we want to do. And now we're exactly in the state that we want this to be in. Excuse me. If I go to the details page, you know, one of the things we want to make sure is, hey, did we actually move it to that state? So, you know, if you've got a workflow that you want to check, or just a standard flow, or a process that you have to walk people through, or different objects through, you want to be able to make sure from your testing perspective that you're actually, those changes are actually getting captured and that the right things are happening. So in this case, all I really want to do is just check and make sure that the lead status got updated to the contact. So I can put this in, right click and do add a test case. And in this case, I really just want to do a read and assert. And all I want to do is extract the value that's there and check and make sure that it matches this value. And when I do this, it's going to go and check and make sure that that was actually the case and that it actually did update to contacted. Now, all of that is being driven, everything that we've done to this point is being driven by a manual entry of text or values. What we want to do in the future, though, and what is totally possible with Provar, is you want to drive that from external data sources, whether it's a CSV file or an Excel file or JSON or a database, whatever the case may be. You can load data in and use that to drive the actual test cases themselves. And you can even use it to do conditional decisions. Based on the data coming in, you can make a decision and do something different. So where I said contacted here, maybe in your input data, you have a way to say, okay, no, it's actually going to go to the unqualified because of these conditions. And then this one's going to go to converted, and this one's going to go to nurturing. And you can check all that, and that gets passed in as part of that data set. Now you have real data that you're testing against, and it's not just a static thing, but it's a more dynamic, much more realistic scenario that you're dealing with. The next thing that I want to show you, and because it's kind of the next thing that a lot of people ask about, is in our opportunities field, we have a custom lightning component. And I just want to show you that you know, one of the things that Provar is capable of doing is actually interacting with this. So I could right click on quantity. This is a simple little component that we have that lets us very quickly and easily add products and see products on a given opportunity. As you can see, this looks slightly different, but what we're doing is now we're saying, oh, this is a flexing component, cool, or a component table, awesome, and it's part of this component embedded page. Oh, that's great. We've recognized all that, and now we know that there's a couple of fields here that we can work with. We got quantity, total price, price book entry, unit price, etc. And so now I can work with any of those values and make changes. And right now I can say, hey, I want to know based on this value or this set of criteria that I can put the condition together and say, from a table perspective, here's the specific value that I want to target. Or I could say, pick the first row and check the first row and make sure the first row matches, because that's the most recent one and that's the one I want to see. So I've got a lot of flexibility and options here. And when I do this, I now have the ability to say, okay, for where I've got quantity 1, I actually want this to be, let's set this to quantity 2 for the one that has a quantity 1 right now, but that's going to choose multiple ones. I don't necessarily want that. So let's choose one that forces it to only pick the one that I want. So hit add and do, step out, step in. Yeah, I think I made the mistake there. Anyway, that's what we're expecting to see. And the point is, you can now work with Lightning components or components on the fly, passing in the same dynamic data, et cetera, no longer restricted to just out of the box componentry. You've got the entire gamut to work with. So with that, Jack, I will hand it back to you and let you, I think you're ready to go with the next stage.
Cool. Thanks, Sean.
Yep.
Let me share my screen yet again. Okay. All right. Can you see my deployment page here?
Yes, sir.
John? Okay, cool. So, so while John was doing that, we ended up rolling back that change. So if we click into this, as I mentioned, this is again kind of a ticketing system. So we can see the status is this has been deployed. The story is number 20. It's been a rollback. You can see in the description that would be added if it were. We could write comments. We can actually check and see the files here and just see that, yep, we just rolled back this one particular piece. It's kind of a simple demo we're doing here, but one thing to note about the power of rollbacks with Blue Canvas is that given that it is a Git-based tool, you can actually roll back very, very specific granular changes. So we actually just rolled back this one typo. And it's successfully deployed, so we know that our QA has been restored to a previous state. We feel good about it. But this is where, having Provar is great, again, integrated into Blue Canvas. So we can see that it's enabled, the post-deployment build. I can go ahead and click this button to kick it off. And this is now actually going to build and run some Provar tests, just like the ones that John was talking about creating just now. And it's actually the same suite that we were running in the previous example, which caught that issue. So this will take a minute or two to run. A couple things to note about it is this is a Docker container that's running Provar. So you get kind of a cloud-based version of Provar out of the box here if you're using Blue Canvas. You'll notice that this little arrow here allows you to restart any builds that you need to do, which is pretty cool. And then we have kind of full history and logs like I showed previously. So each of your tickets is going to have a build report that's available for all time. So you kind of have a record of things going forward. So we'll let this run for just a second, and we can check in on our previous rollout that we did together as well. So this is the change that we made in the very beginning of the webinar. I can see the files that are included. I can see the change to the demo class that we made together. You can see that it's successfully passed validation. It's been packaged. I don't think there's any destructive changes in this particular org, but we actually handle destructive changes for you automatically. And it's successfully validated, so it can be kind of reviewed. People can add comments here on the ticket. Let me say it looks good. And I can comment on that. And then if I'm ready to deploy, I can go ahead and quick deploy. You can see it's very clickable in blue here for me. But Blue Canvas offers, basically a permission-based deployment system. So we could actually, set up for each different sandbox who's allowed to create deployments and who's allowed to approve them. So this is enabled on this demo account, but it is for enterprise accounts. So you could actually set up and say, okay, for our production environment, we want to actually only let administrators create and approve deployments. For QA or UAT, we want to say, anyone can create a deployment request, but only select people can approve them. So you have that level of granularity when you go there. So we go in and check in on this. It looks like it's still provisioning. I wonder if it's stuck. Nope, it's completed. So the build has succeeded in just 2 minutes there. So the past test looks good. I can pull up our new HTML report here, and it looks like beautiful. We have 3 passing tests. I love that when it happens in a demo, especially with live automated tests. So it feels good. So we know we're able to successfully roll back. We know that our functional tests are now working, and we can go ahead and fix the issue and redeploy there. So that's kind of it. So I know it's kind of a lot, but we're going to now open up the kind of floor for any questions that folks might have. John, I'll just read out a couple of these for you, if that's okay.
Sure.
So let me go into the question panel. And we've also got Richard Clark from Provar on the line as well. So Richard, feel free to dive in if there's any commentary you want to add, both to the demo as well as to any of the questions that come up here.
Will do. Hi, everyone.
All right. Well, and actually, I guess I have a first question. So Richard, you're a little bit more of part of the team that built the integration. Can you say a little bit more about the Docker image and kind of what that allows customers to do by actually running Provar in Blue Canvas?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things Provar provides is the tool that John showed you in terms of authoring tests, but we don't provide people a cloud platform to run them. You run them yourself, and typically in the past that would be something like a Jenkins server or some other CI tool. What Blue Canvas and ourselves have done, we've collaborated together so that what we can do is run Provar for the first time within a Docker container, which means you can run it anywhere. And in this case, it's running on the Blue Canvas infrastructure, so there's nothing else to set up. So you use Provar locally, you create your test cases, you sync those back with Blue Canvas so it can read and access them. And then at runtime, it knows what Provar looks like. It's got the Provar executable installed. You don't have to worry about the license keys for anything. It's running on their platform for you. So that gives you that ability to sort of hook all your test cases up and submit them into Blue Canvas. And things like the environments, again, you've got environments in Provar, got environments in Blue Canvas. You can synchronize those up so you can have the same test cases running whether you're working in the dev, UAT, QA environment, and with the test evidence there as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Richard. That's great. Okay, so a couple questions starting to come in. So the first one, I believe, is for Provar. So does it integrate with Community Cloud, Partner Portal, or just Service Cloud?
I'll take that one if that's right, John. So yeah,
Sure.
absolutely anything you can integrate it with. So where it comes to a Salesforce application that has metadata, so things like platform, so any custom application, sales service, even communities, there's metadata, we can do the smart test that John showed you first. And then where you've got more of a custom development, custom HTML, even non-Salesforce, you can test using things like our XPath page object mapping as well. So any of those things.
Great. What about integrations with Jira, Slack, et cetera, or just general webhook capabilities for integrations with Provar?
So today it's primarily based on webhooks. We have some really powerful API connection endpoint management pieces that allow you to kind of set that call up accordingly. But that being said, we do have some pretty exciting stuff coming down the pipe that will take that out of the realm of just being in the webhook arena and more of a direct integration. So stay tuned for that. I can't speak too much on it yet, but there's some stuff coming down the pipe.
Great.
Just to add to that, there's any web service you've got, you can make a test step in Provar. So you can use the Jira's public API for writing or creating a test case, or you could write to ALM or anything else you want to write to its public. You can hook that in, Slack, whatever. But what John's talking about is us making that easier for people to do without having to create your own JSON.
Great. Another question, can we test Visualforce pages both in Classic and Lightning in Provar?
Absolutely. And that's kind of for the most part, if you're using the native Salesforce componentry, you'll get a lot of the dynamic aspects of what we showed with the custom component that we had on the screen just now. And if it's all custom development, all very detailed, our standard page object process will pick that all up, let you go forward with it as if it was just same as anything else. The only difference being you just won't get the dynamic metadata background, self-healing dynamic nature of it. So yes, absolutely.
Great. Cool. Is it possible to execute test cases with different environments important for regression testing and smoke tests after deployments?
Absolutely.
Or John, yeah.
Yes, the short answer to that is that yes, you can do that. The slightly longer answer is that not only can you do that, but that can be parameterized and controlled via your build XML files for your Ant execution. So whether you're wired it up to your environment, build integration system, or any other tool, you can now pass those environment variables in and control which one, and then each environment can have their own set of credentials, et cetera. And that's the kind of stuff that now lets you really build once, run everywhere kind of setup.
Great. Could the test cases be injected by a CSV or comparable file to go through different scenarios with a generic test case?
I believe in reading this, they're asking if it can be kind of a data-driven test where, depending on the contents of the input file, different things happen. And the answer to that is yes. You can read in either, in the case of an Excel file, a specific tab or a specific section of that. For a CSV file, you would read in the entire thing, or a JSON file, et cetera. But the input from that can be put into an overall list, and then you can either run through and action on everything in that list, or you can break it down and say, okay, loop through every row in this and do something different based on that row. And the information in that row, you can use that to pass into another callable test case that allows you to say, okay, when I run through it with this row, this is the set of information I'm going to use, do this. But then when I call it again, I'm going to pass in a different set of information. And on the callable test side, there may be some logic in there that says, depending on what set of information I get, do something differently. And that is totally controllable by your external source. So if you have it all set up where you have this logic and this flow defined in a Excel file, for example, you can then translate that to, as long as you've got all of the callable test cases in place and all of the logic correctly identified, you can now use that Excel file as an input to drive your entire test suite. And you have one set of test cases, but you could have 50 different scenarios covered by your Excel file, and it drives all of that for you.
Great, that's awesome. Is it possible to execute negative testing to check validation rules?
Absolutely. Same concept as your asserts to make sure something is right. You can also make sure something is not correct, and that it does not equal something, etc., and test accordingly. The bigger thing to keep in mind in that piece is that you have the proper conditions defined and set up. So what happens when you hit that negative state and what your expectations are? Do you fix it and then check again to make sure it is correct, etc.? Negative testing gets a little difficult to kind of manage if you don't have some rules of engagement defined. But as long as you have that in place, and technically even if you didn't, Provar would still work. It becomes a much easier process to manage if you have that kind of defined ahead of time, because then you can say, okay, I want to make sure this thing doesn't work. And when it doesn't work and it doesn't do what it's supposed to do, I want to fix it and then make sure that it does do what it's supposed to do. So that if you have that put in place, it actually allows you to build out a pretty nice, robust negative testing suite. And again, that negative testing can totally be driven by an external data source for all the different permutations. So the first time you run through it, you may only have 5 things in there that you want to run through. And the next time you run through it, you may have 50. And Provar will pick that up accordingly and again, run with it.
Great, awesome. I think we answered this in the demo, hopefully, but there was a question about testing against workflows, processes, et cetera. Yes, that's a big part of the value it sounds like Provar can do, is those declarative type tests are a little easy to create. Yep. Is a wait statement available to test the result of backend integration?
Not only is there's both a wait and a sleep, and the wait is basically takes a condition that says wait for this condition to be either true or false, and then lets you action and prevent you from moving forward for a variety of different steps that we use. And it's one of our more powerful tools that allow us to not have to build in a lot of dedicated wait times or anything, but we can actually specifically wait for elements to appear on the page. Or another good example is we have the ability to hook into Exchange and Google mail servers as a native app. And we can sit there and say, okay, wait for, as part of your overall testing process, you have a message that gets sent out and an email that you need to check. Well, we can go and say, okay, wait for a message to come into this mailbox. And when that message comes in, then do this stuff. Oh, but before you do that, let's grab a whole bunch of information from that message so that we can get all the unique information out of there and actually make sure that the message itself was correct. All that can be handled by a simple wait for that says, oh, you may get 50 messages in there, but until I get the one that I'm looking for, I won't do anything. So,
Great.
Yep.
Got it. Okay, cool. A question about setting up authentication in both apps. Richard, do you want to take that one, or do you need to set up?
I was hoping to touch that one. So yeah, at the moment you need to set up authentication in both applications. But it's not necessarily every user. So in Provar, for example, we do the login as to test for different profiles, for different profile testing. But we are going to be announcing at Trailhead DX our DX component. So we're working with Salesforce on providing a Salesforce DX component, and obviously Blue Canvas supports Salesforce DX scratch orgs as well. So at that point, we're hoping this year to have a integration through scratch.org Salesforce DX Dev Hub repository for a shared authentication, but we don't have it yet. So if you were doing a Salesforce forward-looking statement, the answer is no, but it's definitely coming.
Great. Question about Provar and custom Lightning components. Do we have any? Do you guys have any videos that can customers can reach out for? I'm going to assume the answer is yes there.
Yeah, I was just about to type that, and I've put a link into the chat. I don't know if that appears to everyone. I haven't ticked the send privately, so that is that. I've just hit send on that one.
Okay. Well, in either case, I think also, for those kind of questions, we'll move in a second to our contact us. So to get access to this, you can talk to one of the sales folks at either company and learn a lot more about the details of how to get started and how to get your hands on this. So please reach out to both of us. We'll share that in just a second. Let's see. Question about let's see. How is Blue Canvas connected with the org? So we actually connect via the Salesforce OAuth flow. It's a connected app, so it takes just a couple of clicks to authenticate. We use the secure Salesforce authentication process to do that. And so any of your changes are then backed up in real time that way. So it's a very simple process, uses the standard OAuth from Salesforce. So that answers that. Just rolling through these. Can we run parallel testing in multiple sandboxes? I believe that's a roadmap item, is that right?
So there's two answers to that. So one, obviously within Blue Canvas, we can run parallel deployments. In fact, you were doing that earlier, weren't you? You were doing one deployment while another was still going through. And so the Provar test, I believe you can trigger automatically with that checkbox. So you can definitely do that. In terms of Provar, if you want to use something like Selenium Grid to get parallel testing, that's something else that we do support as well, but we don't have it in this demo today. Running under using Docker as well, but that's definitely something that we do support in our 1.9.8 release, which is about 2 weeks away.
Great. And scheduling tests was a request. So I think we're excited to announce this is a brand new feature, and there's some extra kind of roadmap items like scheduling tests for specific days or times that is definitely coming down the pipeline. Okay, well, I think the question about testing in multiple browsers, is that possible?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's obviously a core part of the Provar setup, the multi-browser, multi-profile testing, and you can choose to have them that each one you'd have a different test report, and you can choose how many of those sort of scenarios to run. So there's no reason you couldn't chain several post-deployment scripts here as part of Blue Canvas, or you could do it as a sort of email delivery of those reports for different browsers as well. You can chain those together. That's really just configuration of your Ant script.
Great, great. Okay, and there was one question about kind of partnerships with official partnerships with Salesforce. I think Richard answered in the chat, but I'll just say it here so we can hear it. Yes, we're both partners with Salesforce. Work very closely with the product management teams at Salesforce, who are on the DX team and various other tooling teams. I can say for Blue Canvas, we're actually in the process of adding a product to the App Exchange. So that's something that we are currently working towards to make it even easier to find us and get connected. But we're already partnered with them in other ways as well. And I know Provar as well. All right, so I think we're gonna come up on time here. So if we didn't have time to get to your questions, by all means, please reach out to us. Let me share our contact information. So if you want to get in touch with either of us, you can go to either of our websites, bluecanvas.io or provartesting.com. I know you can reach us at team@bluecanvas.io if you want to shoot us an email. We'll be hanging out there to answer any other questions that may come up. And if you're interested in getting access to this, please shoot both of us a note. Anything else, John or Richard, you wanted to add?
I think that's all. I mean, you did a good job of covering it all.
Yep, and the recording will be sent out to everyone that registered yet, as well as the participants today.
That's right. That's right. Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks everyone. Appreciate your time, and we look forward to getting in touch later.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.